Yeah.
And I'm just going to check that
it
is actually live.
Thank you. Well, it says I'm live. Hello. Welcome to UK Crime Book Club. Sorry, we've had a few technical hitches, Jane and I, this evening, but we've seemed to have managed to get there eventually. So thank you for everybody for being patient. I'm going to add Jane into the stream because at the moment you can't see her, but I can. So I'm going to, there we go.
Hi, everyone.
Good evening. Welcome to UK Crime Book Club. And I am delighted this evening, I can't even remember whether it's this afternoon or this evening now, to be joined by 8 top 10 best-selling author Jane Corry, and her book I Died on Tuesday, which is I've got here, is out this week in paperback and is already out, I believe, Jane, in ebook. Is that correct?
It is, yes, thank you. It is very exciting.
Would you like to start by introducing yourself and I Died on a Tuesday?
Yes, thank you. So my name's Jane Corry. I'd always wanted to write novels. I trained as a journalist to begin with, and I had 12 novels that were not published, and then I struck lucky with number 13. I wrote romance for a while, and then when my first marriage ended, I took a job as a writer in residence of a high security male prison, which made me realize that actually crime can happen to ordinary families. And ordinary families in inverted commas. And so my books are very much about that, but they're warm crime. So they're very family orientated, and they usually end hopefully with a kind of warm upbeating ending. So I Died on a Tuesday is about one day when a girl called Janie is knocked off her bike and left for dead, and 3 stories about what happened on the day. And who do you believe 20 years later when evidence comes to light?
Yes, okay. Jane's going to just read a page from the book for us, just to set the scene.
Okay, thank you. I have to get my glasses on here. Right. So, chapter 1. 20 years ago, the day of the accident, Janie. On the day that I died, the sea was exceptionally flat. There was nothing to indicate that anything was amiss or that in 40 minutes I would be out of this world. Looking back, I can be quite precise about the time because it generally takes me 35 minutes to swim across the bay and back. If the sea is rough, it can take a little longer because you have to fight your way through the waves and pretend not to be frightened. I'm good at pretending. Besides, the sea doesn't like cowards. It can smell blood. I propped my bike against the railings opposite the Seaside Hotel, the only one open on the front now. In summer, it's quite busy, but autumn is setting in. Business will perk up a bit when it gets to half term, but right now I savour the peace. It's 6:30 in the morning. No one is around, not even a dog walker. It's as if the world has slept in. But the sun, that's awake all right. It's rising now before me like the tip of a giant beach ball bathed in apricot and gold. For a moment, I just stand there, drinking it in. If someone had made something like this in a factory and then put it in an art exhibition or the window of some fancy shop, it would sell for millions. But people take the sunrise for granted. I'm ashamed to say that I used to do that too, until everything changed.
And yeah, whoa, does it change? I really love the book. It's such a compelling story, and it's big, isn't it? Because your books are normally, I mean, it's large compared to your normal books. Would you agree?
It's a funny thing about length because publishers generally like books to be sort of certainly under 100,000 words. And this is nudging it. So yes, it sort of depends on how much you can get away with as an author, how much you can keep all the whole story in. But it is a big book because it's from the points of view of 3 different people, 2 main people, and then Jane is flash through it because spoiler here, she does die on a Tuesday, but it's a medically induced coma, and so you hear her voice throughout.
Yeah, and I have in other books you write from multiple perspectives, but have you done 3 before? Is that, I know that she's.
I have done 3, but the third, as I said, is a very short, almost interlude, and I love doing those because you can really play around with the unreliable narrator with those inserts. I mean, I'm writing next year's book at the moment, and again, I've got that third person who's the unreliable narrator, and such fun. I love twists, and I love characters that you think you know who they are, and actually they're not necessarily the people that you assume.
No. Well, I think that's the exciting thing, isn't it? If you've got, you know, you've got the two main characters, so you've got Robbie and Vanessa. And Robbie Manning is, I kept on thinking of like Robbie Williams. I don't know who you had in mind when you wrote him. But...
Well, nobody in mind, actually. I mean, it's quite funny because my youngest son joined a band when he was about 15. And I always thought that it, you know, I thought it was a craze. I hoped it was a craze, as I used to drive him to my gigs in my pajamas at night and pick him up at night. But in fact, he went on to play at the Reading Festival and now makes music his career. So I'm really interested in how young men like Robbie can become famous after starting from the beginning. But going back to names, I do like names that end in a Y. There's something warm and familiar about them. And
yeah. Well, he, like you say, he sort of, you know, we find out about his sort of where he comes from as the book progresses. It's quite a difficult one to to speak about because you don't want to give spoilers. But he sort of is, you know, he's very famous. He's married. He's got children, and then something happens, and his life tumbles down, doesn't it? Like dramatically in front of him.
Yes.
And I think the thing I found interesting about him, and I don't know how you felt when you wrote him, was basically that image that he had of that sort of golden boy, everybody loved him, and how quickly that turned to be.
Yes. I think you picked up a really important strand in my writing, and this is something that I learned in prison, that people's lives could just change overnight because somebody committed a terrible crime, either intentionally or unintentionally. I remember one man coming up to me and saying that he had been driving 10 miles more than he should have been. He was driving at 40, he should have been driving 30. A man came out and he went into that man, and that man died. And the mother of the boy, he was really a boy, he was in his early 20s, who committed that crime, was unable to go out of the house. And that made me think about how the ripple effect of a crime goes out and out to so many different circles, to the tragedy of the family who lose somebody, and the family who have to cope with the fact that their child or husband or lover or daughter has committed a crime. But may I tell you about one of the other key inspirations for the novel?
Of course, yes, please do.
So about 15 years ago, when I was a single parent and doing lots of different jobs, all writing jobs, but, you know, lots of different jobs, I was asked to teach on a writing course where there was a young girl in her late 20s who'd had a stroke and couldn't talk, but she could sing, and that's how she communicated. And often, yes, it's amazing. And she has stayed in my mind, like certain people I've met over the years. They sort of stay in the back of your mind, and suddenly you can find yourself writing about them. And she came out on the page, and my editor quite rightly said, "Can this really happen?" And I said, "Well, it happened with this girl." So then I did a bit more research and found that, yes, actually, it's a certain percentage of people who have strokes who can't talk, but because the brain operates the singing side in a different way, let me rephrase that because I'm not a scientist, because a different part of the brain operates singing from speaking, you can sing. You can perhaps start with learning nursery rhymes or small things, which is what happened with some of the people I interviewed as part of this research. So my character that's what happens to my character Janie. And I just think it's really, there must be something in the mind that makes you think about people over the years, not in a big way. They kind of sit there almost in an archive, just waiting for their time to go onto stage. And, you know, and
I guess for writing, you've probably got quite a good sort of almost like a library in your mind of these characters that you sort of pull out.
Yes, but I don't know that they're there. That's the amazing thing, that they just sort of pop out, almost as though somebody takes them out for me. It's weird. And I call her Janie. I mean, that's actually what my family call me, Janie, because finding characters' names is quite a balance. So so Vanessa, who is my witness court supporter, um, I wanted to make her in her late 60s. So I'm not ashamed of saying this. I've passed the 65-year age mark, and I no longer try to pretend I'm younger than I am. And I think that we should write more about older women. And so Vanessa's actually nudging 70, but she has a voluntary job, and it's a fascinating voluntary job that not everyone knows about, where you can apply to help a witness in court. You can show them where they sit. You can perhaps be there if they're nervous about something. And Vanessa does this. But at the same time, Vanessa is involved in the case in a way that we don't know about. So I won't go on anymore. But these are my three main characters. And I love to show how people's lives interlink, because life is like that, isn't it? You can often come across someone and you think, oh, well, I was working at that place at that time, or I knew so-and-so too. And life is made up of these connections.
It was the small world something comes into mind, you know, where everybody says, oh, it's a small world. Yeah.
But Vanessa sorry. Well, I was just going to say, if this doesn't sound crazy, I sometimes have this vision of us all coming into the world on this great big slide. You know, we're all on the top of the world and we all shoot down the chute. And there is the potential for meeting all those people in our lives if we are in the right place at the right time, or we ask the right questions at the right time. And I feel, you know, perhaps at the end of our lives, we will say, oh, yes, well, that's how it happened, you know. And this is, as I said, a mental vision in my head.
That's really interesting. I really like Vanessa. I thought she was a very deep character.
Thank you. I'm very proud of Vanessa.
But she has a really, you know, she sort of starts off, you find out about, but actually when you find out that she's sort of, you know, widowed and, and she's, you know, she's loved her husband, and as the book progresses, her life is completely tipped upside down because of things that she thought hadn't happened. I think I can say that.
Yes. No, you can definitely. Yes.
So I thought I found that I was really interested in one of the bits I found really interesting from the writing point of view was how you managed to sort of keep the us from guessing, because you know, there's so many. I guess there is red herrings, and and I always call you the queen of the twist, because you do some cracking twists, and this one is no exception. But actually, how sort of does that come as part of the process? Do you have to sort of think about it afterwards, or do you write it and then edit?
It's really hard when you're asked to analyze the process, because to me it's almost like magic writing. You start to write, and then an idea will come, and you will weave that in, and then you'll put your work down for a bit, go for a walk, go and pick up my grandchildren from school or something, do something. And then while I'm doing that other activity, which doesn't involve writing at all, an idea will just fall into my head. And I think that's how it works. Now, I'm no good at jigsaw puzzles. I can do the bits with straight edges, but I'm no good at the bits in between. But I do love it when the jigsaw bit falls into my head and I realize, that's what happens. That's why so-and-so doesn't realize that so-and-so happens. So it's very much an embryonic process. And I swim in the sea myself. So I have to say, I was born a Londoner. I was landlocked for years. I always wanted to live by the sea. And when I married again and we moved to the sea, I started swimming every day before it got very popular, I have to say. I took my inspiration from a much older woman who swam every day, and I used to look at her and think she was mad, and she said, you should try it, and I did, and I was hooked. And I often get my ideas when I'm swimming in the morning with my swimming buddy. We go down at 7 in the morning, and swim throughout the year. And I often get my ideas when I'm right out there, and I have to hang on to that idea and remember it till I get back
when
home.
you get back. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. I guess you can't take a notebook with you.
Oh, I wish. Yeah. So what I do is I blow that idea up in my mind like a giant cartoon. I remember when one of my children was revising for an exam, I went to some talk that a teacher gave about how parents can help with revision, and he said, he was talking about history, and he said, think of historical facts, blow them up like a massive cartoon, each scene, and weave them in like a film. And that is one way of remembering if you can't write something down.
That's really interesting, because quite often I think it's that time, isn't it? Like when you're driving the car or washing the dishes, it's that sort of time where you've got nothing else to think about, and your head is clear for a check. Yeah, for a minute.
Headspace, exactly.
Yeah. So did you write the characters, so the stories, so Robbie, Vanessa, Janie, did you write them all individually, or did you write them as a whole?
No, I wrote it as a whole, but so I don't do it in 3 different strands, because the things that one character does leads into the things that another character does. But what I always do, perhaps I should say what I never do, is do more than one character in a day, because I really have to think myself into that character. I need to imagine how they would feel. It's very intense. And I couldn't do that with 2 characters in one day. I have to be able to separate them.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because you almost get sort of inside their head in a way then for that day, and then just
yes, and maybe that week, because what I like to do is do a collection of chapters from one person's point of view. So maybe 5 chapters, maybe 6, and then go on to the next person, and then so on, so that you have a chance to really get in and be invested in that character till you know them. So it's a bit like being in a gathering, a group of people, and you spend some time talking to one person, and then you go on to another, and you realize there are actually connection points between the 2.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting, because some people do write, they write completely out of order, and I think in my mind I'm quite sort of plan process, so I think I would have to plan. And
you see, actually you have hit on a good point there, because when I'm revising, and we, like many authors, I revise several times, one of the things I will do at the end when it's all written is to read through each character consecutively, so that I can see that things match, so that I haven't written that she does something.
So they sort of flow through.
Yes. I sometimes imagine it like a skein of silk. I mean, I really can't sew to save my life, but I do love the look of those beautiful coloured silks hanging down. And it's like taking one of those threads out, which is one of the characters, and checking that it all hangs together.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. I like that one, because actually it sort of fits together. So we've got some people watching, and I can see the comments. And so, hi Sarah. She says she loved I Died on a Tuesday, and she also loves Vanessa. She's also asked, what would your internet search history say about you if you were raided? Well, I was going to ask you similar, because about your research. What research do you do for your novels?
Oh my gosh, that is a really good point. Yeah. Okay, so a lot of crime. I don't use my internet very much for research, to be perfectly honest. I get the idea first, then I'll do the research. So let me try and think this one through. So, okay, so let's take the example of Janie, who can sing and not talk. So my history search would show a lot about that, about aphasia strokes. I didn't even know what aphasia strokes were until I did this. So it's when people can't necessarily speak or find it difficult to communicate. It would also reveal quite a lot about witness supporters. It would also involve a fair amount about how much might somebody get for murder or hit and run, or when is it manslaughter, when is it killing. That might cause a few issues, actually. So yeah, that could be quite interesting. Yes.
Yeah.
And can I just sorry, I was just going to say, it's lovely that when people say they love my book, if they feel like putting a comment up on Amazon or something, it's always really nice when people can leave reviews. Only if they want to, but it is always lovely, but only if they want to.
I think it's really helpful as other readers as well to I always sort of like to share my reviews, because I think it's sort of, you know, and they can vary massively as you will know.
Yes, they can. Yeah.
One of the things, so I think we can say that Robbie's arrested. That's in the blurb, so I think that's not
it's very early on. We know he's arrested. So that's all right. Yes.
And he goes to prison, and I sort of, I know from, we've chatted before about, you know, you worked in a male prison, didn't you, as writing, and I wondered whether, and so his initial scenes in prison were quite scary and intimidating, and was that sort of inspired by your sort of work in the male prison?
Or? I couldn't have written about prison, and I don't think I'd have wanted to if I hadn't spent 3 years, 2 days a week, going into this prison and not being part of education. I was sent in by a charity that employed about 10 writers and put them in different prisons through the country. And it was such an eye-opener. And I was so scared. As I said, I did it because I needed the money. And then when I did it, I realized that this was something, if this doesn't sound too stupid, that I was kind of meant to do, that it showed me another side of life. I think I was probably very sheltered until then. One of the things that really came across was, as I said earlier in our conversation, was the impact on the family, which is why when Robbie is arrested, you've got the horror from the children and his wife, and this realization that they didn't know their father. The things that can happen to men. So I went into prison, as it were. I always joke that I went from women's magazines to prison, which is actually, you know, true. I was literally one week working on a women's magazine and then the next working in a prison. Is that one has an idea. Well, I had an idea of what prisoners were like before I went in, and some of them fitted that stereotype, but many did not. And I wanted to show that there were many people there who could have been a next door neighbor or a husband or someone on the school run. There were people there for all kinds of reasons, some terrible reasons, drugs and drink, huge factors. I mean, I've never done drugs, and I never used to drink very much, but I did like my glass of wine on a Friday night, and I actually stopped drinking altogether. So I haven't drunk anything for 15 years, no alcohol, because I was just so shocked at some of the things, some of the stories that they wrote about, because they'd taken substances.
I guess that writing for them, sorry, I was going to say the writing for them is obviously, they probably reveal a lot more about themselves than they would in a conversation.
Well, yes, and this was what really puzzled me when I applied for the job, thinking I wouldn't get it, but feeling I ought to try and do something that was going to bring in a weekly income, monthly income rather. I thought, well, how's this going to work? What am I meant to do? So at the interview, they basically said, you're not part of education. You can do whatever you want. You can help them write. They said, what would you do? So I'd said, well, I'd help people write life stories, poems, whatever, and they were all the sort of things that I did do. But I was so nervous. I must tell you this story. It does not reflect well on me. I was so nervous at this interview. I hadn't had an interview for 26 years, because when I said I worked on women's magazines, I'd been freelance. So I did have a staff job on women's magazines. I turned freelance when my children were born. So when I went, as I said, to the prison, I hadn't been interviewed for 26 years. So the governor, so there we are with 5 men interviewing me. And the governor halfway through said, so what would you do if an officer came in and said, right, everybody out, there's an alarm? And I said, I'd get people to finish halfway through the sentence so that when they came back, it's easier for them to pick up. And he said, and by then half the prison would have escaped. So I knew then that I'd, failed. There was no way they were going to give me the job after that. So I visibly relaxed. And then that night they rang and offered me the job. So you
couldn't have done that badly.
Yeah, well, no, but I find that quite comical in many ways. So maybe that's a tip for people doing interviews, is to mess it up. But it is a bit of a gamble. But that's what I did with the men. We wrote we wrote short stories, we wrote all kinds of things. And then somebody said to me, and this is actually really important, somebody said to me, well, you must enter your men for the Kessler Awards. So that's spelled Koestler, after Arthur Kessler. And I said, what are they? And they said, well, they're awards given to men and women in prison for art, but also writing. So I did enter my men's work. And once a year they're judged. And some of them were graded, or some of them got, you don't get a silver trophy or anything like that, but you are commended or highly commended, or you might win an award. And the officers would say that it changed men's behavior, so that if they got more self-respect, they behaved better. Now, I used to think, well, why should they have self-respect? Why should I try to improve their self-respect when they've done these awful things? But as it was pointed out to me, the whole point about prison is that when people leave, they try to make a better life. And if this can help, then that's part of it. So when I left the prison after 3 years, they did actually ask me to stay on for a fourth year, but I could see myself staying there forever and ever. And actually, I was then planning on getting married for a second time and moving further away. But I then volunteered to be a judge on the Kessler Awards, which I've been doing now for some years. So once a year, I go up to Wormwood Scrubs, and I have been doing the Life Story Awards. This year, I'm doing what's called Flash Fiction. You know about Flash Fiction, obviously, and so that's very important to me to do this as a voluntary thing, because I believe that writing can help us get through so much in life, whether we're in prison or not.
That's really, I really, I think that's amazing. And I think the fact that, you know, that you still do it is you know, shows what an impact it's had on you, and also the people who are part of it, because I imagine, like you say, it's easy to judge, isn't it? But actually
it's very easy to judge. Yes, I mean, I sometimes say you can take the girl out of the prison, but you can't take the prison out of the girl. And for me, I can never actually get the prison out of my head. Is this a good or a bad thing? I don't know. It does make me sometimes think of the worst things that can happen, but at the same time, I know it made me stronger, because I was scared. One of the things I really got frightened about was going into the sex offenders wing, and it was laid out so that you were meant to sign in to the staff office when you went into a wing, and that was generally by the double doors that you had to go in. You were given keys to the wings, you had them around your belt. I did not have an officer next to me when I did my workshops, unless I brought an outside speaker in. So I happen to know Colin Dexter, and he very kindly came to give a talk. But at the sex offenders wing, there was no office by the gate. You had to walk right past everyone's cell, where people would be standing looking to sign in at the other end. And, you know, I find that now scary too.
Yeah. Well, I imagine most people would, to be fair.
Yes.
Going back to the book, and I was sort of interested in what was the sort of most enjoyable process of the book, and actually what was the most difficult?
Gosh, that's a really good question. So the most enjoyable is when you get that tingle, you get that, oh yes, she does that, or that happens, and oh wow, that could happen too. That is just a magic moment. I find it quite hard to live real life when I'm writing a book, because my head is always in this, in my plot. So those magic moments can happen at inopportune times when I'm meant to be doing something else. But as I said earlier, but that to me is the most exciting bit. And then your second question was, what's the most difficult bit? So
yes,
well, okay, I can tell you. So I've never been able to do numbers. I mean, it's a complete joke. I even find the 24, I nearly said the 28-hour plot, which is very indicative of my mind. So the 24-hour plot is a mystery to me. You know, 17:30. Why can't it just be 5:30 in the afternoon? And when it comes to working out how old somebody is, you know, I can make a 33-year-old 53 at the stroke of a pen. And so for me, it's the numbers and the ages and making sure that that's all correct that I find difficult. luckily, I have a good copy editor who knows that I can't do numbers or dates. So.
I mean, I guess I was going to ask you actually about whether you'd ever wanted, because all your books are standalone at the moment. I ever wondered whether you'd ever fancy doing a series, but maybe that would make it even life more complicated.
I don't. It wouldn't. Yes, it wouldn't work with these kind of books. I do like the idea. I do have something in my head that I might do in the future, but it wouldn't work with these kind of books. Although I adored Mary Wesley's habit of putting into subsequent books in a minor role characters who'd been big in previous ones, so you never felt you lost them.
And, I like that. It's nice to go back, isn't it? And I guess just even if they're just sort of, you think, oh yeah, they were in book 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever. No, I like that. I really liked, obviously Jane and I are both Devon based. There's a lot of people in in UK Crime Book Club are all across the country. So it's nice to have a Devon author on, and also for me, for reading it, the Exeter connection, and obviously it was really sort of, I really like that. And so was that because did you choose to base it in Exeter or part of it in Exeter because of you being here?
Well, I always think we write best about what we know, and so I found, as I said earlier, I felt landlocked for my life. I've always felt drawn to the sea. My grandfather went to sea when he was 15 years old. He died before I was born, but I've just always loved the sea, and my father did as well. So I felt that I was meant to be there. And in my books, the sea is a character. It's it really is. But I mean, just going back to characters, one of the things that I would like to mention is I was treated very well in the prison. The men were really nice to me. They were kind. They were good to me. I just had 1 or 2 slightly scary experiences, but on the whole, they were nice. They were kind and respectful, and I'm grateful to them for that.
And I probably appreciated what you were doing, I guess, as well.
Well, yes, I think the thing is that they didn't have to come to my classes. It wasn't like certain educational classes where it was mandatory. And in fact, they had to get permission from people in their wings to come to class. So that if somebody had done something bad, then they would probably, like beaten somebody up in a cell, then one of the punishments would be that they didn't do certain things, and that was the one.
When they sort of, we said about your twists, and we talked about them sort of coming, and we can't talk about the twists in this book, and I know that it's something that you're really, really good at, and hooking your readers in, because although it's a big book, I really rattled through it, because it's really, I think you want to, that you sort of, the chapters end on a way that you want to carry on to the next one, don't you? It's sort of like hangers.
No, I love doing that, and that's something I try to do at the end of every single chapter, to make people want to move on. It's maybe it's a journalist side. You try to engage somebody right at the beginning. That's almost the other way around in journalism, actually. So with your first line, you try to bring the reader in. You do the same in novels, but also that final line of each chapter has got to make the reader want to go on, because you could lose somebody otherwise.
Sarah's asking, and I've got the question to ask, is you mentioned earlier about what you're writing at the moment. Can you share anything with us?
No. No. Sorry. It's very much I can't, for so many different reasons, and not even my family know. But I can say that there are 3 main characters, and that one is that sort of anonymous. Actually, I can tell you that one of them is sort of anonymous character that comes in every now and then. It's set in a different world, and yet at the same time there is prison in it. I can say that should I say this? I probably shouldn't. I probably shouldn't. But I will just say that there are different techniques when writing about somebody who's in prison for a short time compared with a character who's in prison for a long time.
Yeah.
So, and I won't say anymore.
No, we don't want to get you into trouble.
No.
And how long does that process? Because you generally write one book a year, don't you?
Yes.
So,
yes.
So are you really are you sort of right in the midst of it at the moment?
Yes, I am. I'm on the second edit. So the way it works is that the way it works for me is that I take about 4 months to write the first draft, and that can be not too rough. I mean, reasonably. I like to have it looking fairly neat on the page by the time I get to that ending. And then I will read through the whole thing from the beginning to end as though I'm reading somebody else's book or something that I've written some years ago, whereas I will only have finished it 4 months ago. And then I will see where I need to chivvy the pace along, or perhaps change a character, or do X, Y, and Z. And then probably after about 6 months, I will then send it to my editor, who will then make notes and suggest changes, or talk about structure, etc. That's called the structural edit. And then quite often there's a second structural edit, and then there's the line edit, where you go through line by line to see if anything should be cut, constantly watching pace. And then there's a copy editor who, as I said, saves my bacon when it comes to dates, etc. So all in all, from writing that first line on my computer, it's a year until it then gets published.
Wow, that's yeah, so that is quite a long process, isn't it? So do you sort of start, do you have like a time, so do you have time off,
not really. So being freelance, people have wonderful ideas about being freelance, and this was something I was constantly trying to battle with, actually, when I turned freelance, because you work really hard. One works really hard as freelance because it's hard to set boundaries. I'm not very good at setting boundaries. Luckily my husband is very understanding when I say, oh, I'm just going upstairs for half an hour, and then I come down 4 hours later. So yeah, it's hard to do a cutoff when you're living somebody else's life, as I'm living my characters' lives. I can't just say, okay, I'm going to forget about you for a bit and do something else. It's kind of always there. They are always there. And I love playing tennis, and my friends are quite used to me stopping and say, I'm really sorry, but I have just got to write this one down. So yeah, it's very nice of them, actually. Yes.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, that's amazing, because obviously when you're playing tennis as well, you must be concentrating quite. You must be concentrating.
No. I don't concentrate enough on tennis when I'm writing a book. I'm afraid my head is full of the book.
Full of the book.
Yeah.
So I wanted to touch on the short stories that you write, because you still do write short stories, don't you? I
love short stories. Yes.
Yeah.
So there is a story behind the short stories, actually. So I always knew I wanted to write novels, as I said. I started writing my first proper novel from beginning to end, when my youngest was 3, wrote 12 novels over 12 years that didn't get published, then finally did get published. And that was when I wrote romance, got published as a romance writer. So wrote 9 romance novels, and then went to prison, as it were. And right at the beginning, sorry, do you know, your question's just gone out of my head? Isn't that awful? It's just remind me of the question again. It was
just about your
short stories. Right, thank you. So while I was still trying to get published, I went to a talk that was given by the then fiction editor of Woman's Weekly magazine, and she talked about writing short stories and what they looked for. And I thought, oh, I like the sound of that. So I'd never written a short story in my life. Went and wrote one. I wrote it in a kind of chronological way. My first husband and I had gone away for 3 days, leaving the children. I'd never left them before. It was totally terrifying. And although I'd left them with very good friends. And I wrote this story about a character who did exactly that. And I put it under day 1, day 2, day 3. And it was accepted. And it was so exciting to see that short story in print. That was my first piece of fiction in print. And for years, I'd written these journalistic articles. So, you know, I had been used to seeing my articles in print, but it just gave me that amazing buzz to see my short story in print. So when I then finally got a novel published, I didn't give up, and I continued writing short stories all that time until I got published. And one of the most amazing things that happened to me in my life, and I do tell people this to say, please enter competitions, but enter them not thinking that you'll win, just enter just in case, because I came second in a short story competition run by The Lady before I was published as a novelist. And that really made me think, oh, yes, you know, that was amazing. Because it meant that somebody out there thought I could write fiction. So I'd had all these rejections for my novels, but somebody had made me come second. It didn't matter that I wasn't first. I'd been categorized. I'd been given that second. But the prize was lunch with Rosamund Pilcher and Arthur Haley. Isn't that just amazing?
Wow.
With the winner. And I've got a photograph of that. It was in the 90s and mid 90s. And no, actually about 96, 97, something like that. And it was just a dream come true.
So, I mean, that gives real inspiration to anybody who's watching that has felt that, you know, the rejection. And I know, you know, I read about it a lot, about the rejection and people saying don't give up. Yeah, but it must be so difficult to not give up.
It is. I mean, the thing is that I say a real writer doesn't give up, but it is totally and utterly demoralizing. So I think short stories are great. I mean, it's a completely different knack to them.
Yeah.
I've got a short story coming out quite soon in the Sunday Express, and you have to put a different hat on when you're writing your short story. But there are some great writers' magazines out there. Writers News, you know, they run monthly writing magazine. They run monthly competitions, and as I said, I do say to people, enter, but don't expect to win because you don't want to feel dejected. Enter for the discipline. And also the title might give you an idea for something that you want to write, write that doesn't go into a competition. Just keep doing it.
Is it almost like a treat when you've written a book for like this one, like nearly 100,000? Was it almost a treat to go back and write something so that may have like a word limit, or, you know, that, you know, is, you know, going to be one page?
You see, they're both treats. I just feel so lucky to be a published novelist. That is my treat. It's also just one thing before I answer that full question is that you feel vindicated when you're finally published. You actually feel vindicated because there are a lot of people out there who think you won't do it, and they'll say, you know, it's very difficult to do, etc. But is it a treat to write a short story? It's a different kind of treat. It's like having a different I'm not even going to say a different flavored ice cream. It's a different food. It's a different smell. It's a different experience. But I do love it. One thing I don't do usually is write short stories at the same time as a novel. So in between, there are breaks in between that process that I've described, because you're waiting perhaps for your editor to do the edits or the copy editor to do her bit. And that's when I write my short stories. And I get very tingly and very excited about it. And also I'll have made a list of ideas for short stories in one of my notebooks. So that's when I'll pick one of them up.
Oh, that's quite a good tip, actually. What, just sort of things that come into your head?
Yes, exactly. So I've got a few coming out actually in the next few weeks, because as you said, the paperback of I Died on a Tuesday comes out on Thursday. So sort of I wrote quite a lot of short stories a few months ago, hoping that they would come out at about this time. So yeah, I mean, it is very exciting.
Yeah, and it's great because you've, as we said at the beginning, 8 8 top 10 best-selling paperbacks. You know, so but you can tell that you haven't lost your love for that. You know, it's not become like you can see from, you know, from how you speak about it, that you still really love the process and enjoy it.
Well, I do, and I don't take it for granted. So I do feel that I feel very lucky, because there are a lot of good writers out there who aren't published, and that's hard. I do try to help people when I can, to give them advice, or talk a bit about pace, for example, because pace is a very important factor. If a story drags, if a novel drags, or if the character does not have a problem, then that's not going to be able to engage the interest of an agent, for example. You see, so there are certain principles that you learn along the way that I think are important. So giving the character a secret, giving them a problem, giving them characters around them that make them act in a certain way, or characters that they are yet to meet, for example. So all that works. But may I just tell you about how my first crime novel got published by Penguin? Because that in itself, I feel is a bit of a fairy tale, really. So I knew when I left the prison that, as I said, I wanted to write about how crime affects families. So I wrote a couple of smaller books, and then which didn't really do anything. And then I had this idea about writing about a lawyer who was sent into prison to handle a murderer's appeal. And I found a new agent who said she liked that idea and was going to take me on the strength of the first 3 chapters, which I thought was just wonderful of her. She's called Kate Horden. She's my agent. And she then, when it was written, sent it off to various publishers. And I did not get excited, because I'd had so many rejections in the past. And then came this day, about 2 or 3 months afterwards, when she rang and she said, "Oh, Penguin's interested." And we were actually packing to go up to London for an important family do, some very elderly relatives, and I knew I couldn't be late because, you know, they were very elderly. Timing is very important. And these calls increased during the day, literally in a day. It went from one meeting to another, and I thought, this is unreal. And I wouldn't allow myself to get excited. I just thought, oh, you know, I just can't. I can't invest that, because I've been discovered so many times. No. I later found out that this was because Frankfurt was coming up, and they wanted to buy it before Frankfurt came. And then at the end of the day, they said they want to meet you. So, you know, this is after about 6 phone calls in that day. And by that time, we were in London. And I found myself saying, well, I'm afraid I can't, because I'm going to my 8-year-old's aunt's birthday and I can't be late for her. And they said, well, where? And I thought, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I couldn't. And my mother had died very young, and this aunt was very good and kind to me, and she was kind of one of the substitute mothers, or one of the people who were kind of quite motherly. And so they said, well, where are you staying? So I told them. And they said, we'll come to you. So my editor, is unreal. So my editor then came through the door, and she knew my novel. I mean, within a second, she spoke about my characters as though she had met them herself. And that was Katie Loftus, and she bought the first book, My Husband's Wife. And Katie's moved on now, and I have a different editor who's also brilliant. I'm very lucky with Penguin, incredibly lucky.
Yeah.
And as I said, it was a dream come true. So if it happened to me, it can happen.
I mean, that must give a lot of hope to people, because I mean, that's a lot of books that you wrote previously.
A lot. Yes, I mean, lots of clogged up computers, lots of files on old computers that are lost, especially with moving and getting married again. But of course, now the option of self-publishing is different from the option that it was a few years ago. You know, it's regarded highly in you know, lots of self-published books are regarded very highly, as well as they should be. But also the whole complexity of self-publishing is something that people are beginning to know much more about than they did a few years ago. So I'm hoping that will offer opportunities to other writers, because as we know editors do look through self-published books and will make offers on them sometimes, or many people are very happy staying self-published.
Yeah, some people are. I mean, we have a lot of authors on UK Crime Book Club that are self-published, and and some people actively search it out because they want to be. They want that sort of ownership of their book.
And I can see that. I can totally get that. And so I feel that the opportunities are much more hopeful in a way, which sounds as though I'm going against what I said. So it's very hard getting an agent, but at the same time, the other opportunities are, I think, becoming more available. And also you can follow agents on Twitter and build up a relationship. Whereas 10 years ago, you would be lucky to meet an agent. You might be able to do that at a literary festival if they hold a how to get published event, for example. But it was very hard.
You sometimes win it in a competition if you win. But I mean, then you have to win to get to that stage.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
I'm just looking at. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, now you can follow people on Twitter and social media, and you might or might not get somewhere, but there is that opportunity, hopefully.
I was just going to say, just before we finish, because I'm looking at the time, who's your go-to author? Have you got a go-to that you know?
Yes. Yes. Well, I read quite eclectically, actually. So if I tell you, I'm just looking around now to see what I'm finishing. So I love Anne Patchett, and I've just finished Tom Lake. So I don't read in my genre for lots of different reasons. I want to keep my genre separate. So Anne Patchett's books are always different, and Tom Lake was extraordinary. I've also read recently The Secret Life of Bees, which I wasn't going to read.
Oh, I've got that to read.
Have you? Oh, right. Well, it's wonderful. I wasn't going to read it because there were a lot of books about bees at the moment, and to be honest, I thought it was going to be non-fiction, and then I realised it was fiction, and I just was mesmerised by that. So, as I said, I read outside.
You don't read crime. Some crime writers will write crime, and some don't. So it's really interesting how So you obviously have a break completely from it.
Yes. I mean, I do get sent reviews. I get sent books to review, obviously, but that's different.
Yeah. So just before we go, we'll go back to I Died on a Tuesday, which is, I keep going, the camera's going the wrong way that way.
I hold up the cover. I'm really happy with the cover because I mean, does that sound awful to say I didn't mean that sound self-congratulatory. It's a whole team. But what I mean is I love the colours. Colours to me are really important. I
definitely.
I paint little postcards to send to people, and I just love the green and the orange. So when they said, what did I have in mind? I said I would love some really dramatic colours and the seafront, and they came up with this, and it is exactly what I wanted, which is exciting.
It's great.
Yes, so I hope people.
It's very much sort of. I looked at it and thought, that's definitely a Devon seaside.
Yes, it is. Although my husband comes. Well, my husband comes to Northumberland, and actually, I think it could be somewhere else as well. That's what's.
Yeah, well, I guess that's the thing. It's like sort of are they Victorian houses, because I guess the Victorian seaside is very much across the country. So just before we go, did you want to just tell everybody why they should read I Died on a Tuesday?
Oh gosh. Well, I wouldn't want to say you should read it, but if you like twists and if you like warm characters who want to do the right thing in life but find it hard at times, who kind of have the same issues that you and I and lots of other people have, if you want to be entertained but also feel that this is something that actually really might happen, then I hope you'll like I Died on a Tuesday.
I'm sure they will. I absolutely loved it, and I shall be sharing my review
Thank you
of it. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Jane.
It's lovely to talk to you as well. It's really lovely. I feel we've known each other quite a few years now, and
we have now.
It's great to talk to you. Yes.
Yeah,
wonderful.
and yes, thank you for everybody for joining us. I'm back tomorrow night, and I'm talking to Alex Chowdhury tomorrow night about her book Under Her Roof, which is quite a sort of psychological thriller. So that's completely different. But yeah, so join us then if you can.
Well, thank you everyone for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jane. It's lovely to see you, and thank you everybody for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.